The evening was quiet, and the sky had turned a soft shade of pink and orange as the sun began its slow descent behind the distant hills. The air carried the faint scent of wildflowers mixed with the smell of fresh earth. She sat on the old wooden porch of a small house at the edge of the town, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes staring into the distance as if trying to see something far beyond the horizon. There was a heaviness in her chest, a weight she had carried for years, and tonight she felt that it had to come out. She had promised herself many times that she would never speak of the things that had brought her pain, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the truth had to be told. She glanced at him, sitting a few feet away, leaning against the railing, his legs stretched out in front of him. He had the kind of presence that made the world feel quieter, as if just sitting near him could calm the storms inside someone's mind. He was a cowboy, though not in the exaggerated way you might see in movies. There were no shiny boots or perfectly ironed shirts. He wore simple clothes, a worn-out hat, and a face lined with years of sun and experience. But his eyes, those eyes had a spark that made it impossible to look away. They were steady, honest, and somehow inviting, making you feel like you could tell him anything without fear. She swallowed hard, her throat tight with nerves. She had rehearsed these words in her mind countless times, yet they still felt heavy and raw as they formed on her lips. "I've slept with men I didn't love," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were foreign coming out of her own mouth, and she almost wished she could take them back. But it was too late. The truth was out. For a moment, there was silence. She looked at him, expecting some reaction, anger, disappointment, judgment. But there was none. He didn't flinch, didn't recoil. His expression remained calm, his eyes studying her in that quiet, steady way that made it feel like he was looking right through the walls she had built around herself. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely relieved. It was as if saying the words aloud had taken some of the weight off her shoulders, even though she wasn't sure what would come next. He shifted slightly, resting his elbows on his knees and tipping his hat back. "Life's too short to carry regrets," he said quietly. His voice was low and steady, with a tone that was neither judgmental nor dismissive. "What matters is what you do next, not what's behind you." His words were simple, but they carried a kind of truth that hit her in a way no one had before. It wasn't just a response. It felt like understanding, like he had somehow seen every corner of her life without needing explanations. She found herself staring at him, studying the lines of his face, the way the setting sun caught the edges of his hat, the way his eyes seemed to hold a mixture of warmth and wisdom. There was a quiet strength in him, the kind that didn't need to boast or demand attention. It was the kind of strength that made you feel safe, like someone who had been through storms and survived them could guide you through your own. And in that moment, she realized she had never felt anything like this before. The porch creaked slightly under the weight of their movements, the sound blending with the chirping of crickets and the distant rustle of leaves. She shifted in her seat, still unsure if she had made a mistake by speaking. What if he thought less of her now? What if he decided she wasn't worth his time? But his silence, his steady gaze, reassured her in a way words could not. There was no judgment in him, only acceptance, and that was something she had never expected to find. She thought back to all the choices she had made in her life, the men she had been with, the times she had sought comfort in the wrong places. Each choice had left its mark, and each memory carried its own kind of pain. She had loved, yes, but she had also sought security, companionship, and validation in ways that hadn't always been healthy. And for a long time, she had carried shame, believing that these choices made her less deserving of love, of happiness. But sitting here with the cowboy looking at her so calmly, she began to wonder if maybe she had been too hard on herself. He didn't ask questions, didn't push her to explain further. He simply listened, and that alone was enough. Sometimes, listening is the most powerful thing someone can do, and in that quiet moment, she felt a connection that went beyond words. It was as if he understood the complexity of human emotions, the mistakes and the regrets, the longing for something real and meaningful. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe without the constant weight of guilt pressing down on her chest. The sky darkened gradually, turning into shades of deep purple and blue, with the first stars beginning to appear. A soft breeze brushed her face, carrying with it the smell of the nearby fields, fresh and alive. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because she felt a strange mix of vulnerability and comfort. She had opened up, and instead of being met with scorn, she was met with understanding. It was a new experience, and it was unsettling, yet incredibly freeing. She realized that in confessing her past, she wasn't just telling him a story, she was telling herself that it was okay to be imperfect, that it was okay to have made mistakes, and that those mistakes didn't define her. For the first time, she felt like she could see herself clearly, without the harsh filters of shame and regret. And she saw in the cowboy's eyes a reflection of acceptance. A mirror that showed her she could be seen and still be worthy of care and respect. He finally spoke again, breaking the silence, but his words were not about her past. "Everyone has a story," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Some are full of joy, some full of mistakes, and some a mix of both. What makes a life worth living is not that it was perfect, but that you keep moving forward." She nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. There was wisdom in them, and they carried a kind of hope she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself to smile, a small, tentative smile that reflected the tiniest spark of relief. She didn't feel as heavy as before. The burden she had been carrying felt lighter, as if admitting her truth had started to lift some of the weight from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, or what this connection with the cowboy might lead to, but for the first time, she felt a sense of possibility. The possibility that she could be understood, accepted, and maybe even loved. Not for who she pretended to be, but for who she truly was. The stars grew brighter in the night sky, and the moon began its gentle rise, casting silver light across the fields. The world felt quiet, safe, and full of potential. She realized that speaking her truth hadn't led to rejection. It had led to something far more valuable: recognition, understanding, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps life could still hold beauty for her, even after the mistakes she had made. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, and let her gaze settle on him once more. His presence was steady, comforting. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, she felt a sense of trust blooming inside her. Trust that no matter what came next, she had taken the first step in letting someone truly see her. And in that step, she found a quiet courage she hadn't known she possessed. As the night deepened, she sat there in silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because she no longer needed to fill the space with words. The moment itself, the shared quiet, was enough. For the first time in years, she felt like she could simply be, without fear or judgment, and that realization brought a sense of peace she hadn't known she could feel. And so, as the moon climbed higher and the crickets sang their nightly song, she allowed herself to stay in that moment, holding on to the fragile but growing hope that maybe, just maybe, this quiet understanding could be the beginning of something real, something meaningful, and something entirely new. The night had grown cooler, and the stars shone brighter in the clear sky, casting a gentle glow across the small porch where she and the cowboy sat. The soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant hum of crickets created a peaceful rhythm. And for a moment, The world outside seemed to pause. She shifted slightly, drawing her knees closer to her chest, and looked at him. He was still leaning back, his hat tipped slightly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. There was something calm and steady about him, something that made her feel safe, even when her mind was filled with doubts and fears. She wanted to say more, to explain the feelings behind her words, but she found herself hesitating. For so long, she had been judged, criticized, or ignored when she revealed her past. It had left scars, deep ones that she tried to hide from everyone. But with him, she felt no pressure, no rush, no expectation. Just the quiet presence of someone who seemed to understand without needing all the details. She realized with a mix of surprise and relief that maybe it was okay to just be herself, even with all her flaws and mistakes. He turned his gaze toward her, his eyes catching the moonlight. "Life isn't about the mistakes we make," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen much and learned from it. "It's about how we move forward after them. It's about learning, growing, and finding the courage to be honest even when it's hard." His words were simple, but they carried a depth she hadn't expected. He wasn't lecturing, and he wasn't judging. He was just speaking from experience, and it felt like a hand reaching out to steady her trembling heart. She listened, her mind wandering back to all the times she had wished someone would understand her. She thought about the moments she had tried to explain herself, but had been met with anger, disbelief, or silence. Each of those moments had made her retreat further into herself, building walls around her heart to protect it from more hurt. But now, hearing him speak like this, she felt those walls starting to crumble. There was a possibility here, a possibility of being seen and accepted without the fear of rejection. "I've made choices I'm not proud of," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I thought I was doing the right thing at the time, but now, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I've wasted so much of myself on things that didn't matter." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the release of all the emotions she had kept bottled up inside. She had been carrying them for so long that letting them out felt both terrifying and freeing at the same time. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging every word she had said. "We all make choices we later question," he said, "and some choices leave marks. But those marks don't have to define us. They can remind us of what we've learned, of how far we've come, and they can guide us to make better choices in the future." He paused, giving her a moment to absorb his words. "What matters isn't what's behind you, it's what you do now." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw more than just a cowboy. She saw someone who had experienced life fully, with all its joys and pains, and had come through it with a sense of understanding and patience. There was a quiet wisdom in him, a kind of knowledge that didn't come from books or lessons, but from living, from experiencing, and from reflecting. And somehow that made her feel hopeful. Maybe she could face her own life with that same kind of acceptance. The night air wrapped around them, carrying the faint scent of grass and wildflowers, and she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She realized that this moment, sitting here, talking with him, being honest, was a turning point. It wasn't just about confessing her past, it was about reclaiming herself, about recognizing that she could be open and still be valued. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that she deserved that kind of acceptance. He shifted slightly, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. "You know," he said, his tone gentle, "most people are too busy judging themselves or others to really see the truth. They miss what's important. But honesty is powerful. It frees you, and it draws the right people toward you, the ones who see you for who you truly are, not just the mistakes you've made." His words lingered in the air, and she felt them settle into her heart like seeds of hope ready to grow. She thought about her past again, about the relationships she had been in, the choices she had made, and the lessons she had learned the hard way. She realized that every experience, even the painful ones, had shaped her into the person she was now. They had taught her resilience, empathy, and the value of truth. And maybe, she thought, they had prepared her for this moment, this chance to be seen and understood by someone who didn't judge, who didn't condemn, and who simply offered understanding. For a long time, she had been searching for validation in the wrong places, trying to fill a void with people who didn't truly care or understand. But sitting here, she understood that validation didn't come from others. It came from herself. And yet, there was something remarkable about sharing that understanding with someone else, someone who could reflect it back to her without judgment. It was like finding a mirror that showed her not just her flaws, but her strength, her courage, and her capacity for growth. The moon climbed higher in the sky, casting soft silver light across the porch. She noticed the lines on his face again, the way his eyes seemed to hold both warmth and depth, and she felt a connection that went beyond words. It was as if he had a way of seeing people, not just their actions or their mistakes, but the essence of who they were. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be understood in that same way. He continued to speak, but not about her past or her mistakes. He spoke about life, about moving forward, about finding moments of joy even in difficult times. His voice was steady and calm, like a river flowing gently but powerfully. She listened, letting his words wash over her, feeling a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, with sincerity and without judgment, that made her feel safe. She realized that this was more than just a conversation. It was a lesson in trust, in patience, and in self-acceptance. He was showing her without saying it outright that it was possible to face your past, to own your mistakes, and to still be worthy of care and respect. And as she sat there, watching the stars and listening to his steady voice, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The night wore on, and the world outside the porch seemed to fade away. There was only this quiet space, this shared understanding, and the gentle presence of someone who saw her as she truly was. She felt a lightness in her chest, a lifting of the burden she had carried for so long. It wasn't a sudden or dramatic change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was real. She was beginning to feel that maybe she could face her life with honesty, courage, and an open heart. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "I've never had someone listen like this before," she admitted. "Someone who didn't judge, who didn't make me feel small. It feels strange but good, really good." He gave a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that spoke more than words ever could. In that nod, she saw acceptance, understanding, and a kind of quiet strength that made her believe in herself again. The night continued around them, but she no longer felt alone in it. She felt connected, seen, and understood. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for understanding, but for something deeper, something real and meaningful. She didn't know what the future held, or where this connection with the cowboy might lead, but she felt ready to face it, step by step, with honesty and courage. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, she took a deep breath and let it fill her lungs. She realized that this night, this conversation, was a turning point. It was a reminder that no matter how heavy the past might feel, there was always a chance to start anew, to embrace yourself, and to allow others to see the real you without fear. And in that realization, she found a peace she hadn't known was possible. A quiet, steady hope that perhaps life could still bring unexpected beauty, understanding, and connection. The days that followed were quiet at first, but they carried a sense of anticipation, like the calm before a storm that promised change. She found herself thinking about the cowboy constantly, not in a romantic or fleeting way, but in a thoughtful, reflective way. His words from that first night kept echoing in her mind, gently nudging her to reconsider herself, her choices, and her understanding of life. For the first time in years, she felt a kind of hope that wasn't tied to anyone else's approval, but to the simple truth that she could be accepted as she was. It was a warm morning when they met again, this time in the open fields near the edge of town. The sun hung high, casting long, golden rays across the tall grass. The cowboy was already there, adjusting the harness of his horse, a quiet smile on his face as he looked up and saw her approaching. She felt a flutter in her chest, not from nervousness, but from the unexpected comfort of his presence. She had come to realize that being around him made her feel like herself, without pretenses, without walls, without fear. He gestured toward the horse, offering her a place beside him. "Ever ridden before?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes held a spark of curiosity, as if he wanted to see how she would respond not just to the ride, but to life itself. She shook her head, smiling slightly. "Not really," she admitted. He chuckled softly, the sound warm and easy, like sunlight spilling over a quiet morning. "Then today is as good a day as any," he said, helping her climb onto the horse with gentle guidance. As they rode, the wind brushed against her face, carrying with it the fresh scent of earth and flowers. The rhythmic sound of the horse's hooves against the dirt trail seemed to match the steady rhythm of her heart. For a long time she had felt weighed down by the past, by mistakes she thought defined her, but riding beside him, listening to the soft cadence of his voice as he pointed out the beauty of the landscape, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. It wasn't just the freedom of being on a horse, it was the freedom of realizing that the past didn't have to control her. They stopped at the edge of a small stream, where the water glistened under the sunlight like 1,000 tiny diamonds. He dismounted first, holding out his hand to help her down. She took it, and in that moment, she felt a connection that went beyond words. It was simple, quiet, and yet profoundly meaningful. They sat on a fallen log by the water, watching the gentle ripples move downstream, and for the first time, she felt comfortable enough to let her guard down completely. "I've had a lot of regrets," she said softly, staring at the water. "Things I've done, choices I've made. Sometimes I feel like I've been running from myself for so long." She didn't look at him as she spoke. She felt his presence was enough to ground her. He nodded slowly, understanding in his gaze. "Regret is part of life," he said, "but it doesn't have to define you. It's a reminder that you've lived, that you've felt, and that you've cared. Every choice, even the ones you regret, teaches you something." His voice was calm and steady, like the gentle current of the stream in front of them. "And it's never too late to learn from those lessons and move forward." She felt a warmth in her chest as she listened. His words weren't just comforting, they were awakening something inside her. For years, she had carried shame, believing that her mistakes made her unworthy of love or happiness. But he didn't see her that way. He saw someone who had experienced life fully, someone who had learned and grown despite the pain. And in that recognition, she found a spark of courage, a willingness to face herself honestly for the first time. They spent hours talking, not just about her past or his, but about life itself, about dreams, fears, hopes, and the small moments that made life beautiful. He shared stories of his own journey, tales of long rides across open plains, nights spent under the stars, and times when he had felt lost and unsure. Each story revealed a side of him that was both strong and vulnerable. and she realized that his openness encouraged her own. It was as if sharing their experiences created a bridge between them, a connection built not on fantasy or expectation, but on understanding and truth. At one point, he spoke about the people he had met along the way. Some you meet for a day, some for a season, and some for a lifetime, he said. It doesn't matter how long they stay. It's what they teach you, what they show you about yourself, that counts. She nodded thoughtfully. She realized that, in a way, he had already shown her more about herself in a few days than she had discovered in years of searching for approval from others. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The air turned cooler, and she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a quiet contentment. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about the mistakes of her past or the fear of being judged. She was simply present, enjoying the moment, enjoying the conversation, and enjoying the quiet companionship that had grown between them. He looked at her, and for a moment there was silence, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "You've carried a lot of weight," he said finally, his voice gentle. "But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. It's okay to let someone in, to share the burden, and to trust that not everyone will judge you for it." She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of hearing someone speak words she had longed to hear her whole life. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill her lungs, and allowed herself to respond honestly. "I've always been afraid," she admitted, "afraid that if people knew the truth about me, they wouldn't want to be near me, afraid that I was too broken to be loved or understood." She paused, looking at him, and saw that he was listening, not just hearing her words, but truly listening, with attention and care. That in itself felt like a balm for her soul. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. It wasn't a gesture of pressure or expectation. It was a gesture of connection, of understanding. "Being afraid is human," he said. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite it. And you've already taken the first step, being honest, being open, and facing yourself. That takes more strength than most people realize." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a combination of gratitude and newfound confidence. For so long she had believed that her past defined her, that her mistakes were chains keeping her from happiness. But sitting here, with someone who saw her as she truly was, she began to see herself differently. She wasn't just a collection of regrets. She was someone capable of growth, capable of love, capable of living a life she had once thought was beyond her reach. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, she realized that their conversation had shifted something deep within her. She no longer felt the weight of her past pressing down, no longer felt the shame that had shadowed her life for so long. Instead, she felt a sense of freedom, a freedom to be herself, to explore her own feelings, and to open her heart to the possibility of connection. They rode back slowly, the horse's steady gait matching the rhythm of her thoughts. She felt lighter than she had in years, as if speaking honestly and being heard had lifted a burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying. She glanced at him, his profile illuminated by the soft moonlight, and felt gratitude for his quiet patience and understanding. He had not judged, not lectured, not pushed. He had simply listened and shared, and in doing so he had given her something priceless, the belief that she could be seen and still be valued. By the time they returned to the porch of her small house, the night had fully settled, and the world felt calm and still. She dismounted, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He smiled at her, a simple, warm smile that conveyed more than words ever could. "You did well today," he said quietly. "Not with the riding, but with facing yourself. That's the hardest part. And you did it." She smiled back, feeling a rush of pride and relief. "Thank you," she said softly. For everything. For listening. For understanding. For being here. He nodded, tipping his hat slightly, and in that gesture she felt acknowledgement, respect, and an unspoken promise of trust and companionship. As she watched him ride away into the soft glow of the moonlight, she realized that something had changed. She had taken a step toward healing, toward understanding herself, and toward allowing someone else to see her truth without fear. And in that moment, she knew that this journey, with all its challenges and lessons, was only just beginning. The following days brought a new rhythm to her life, one that was quieter, yet filled with subtle excitement. Each morning seemed to carry a gentle promise, a hint that something different, something real was unfolding. She began to notice things she had long ignored. The way sunlight streamed through the curtains, dust motes floating like tiny stars, the soft sounds of birds calling to each other in the trees nearby. Life, which had once felt heavy and overwhelming, now carried a subtle beauty she had forgotten existed. She and the cowboy spent more time together, though not in dramatic gestures or loud adventures. Their connection grew in small, meaningful ways, sitting quietly on the porch, sharing a simple meal, or walking along the dirt paths that wound through the fields. Each moment felt like a thread weaving a tapestry of trust, understanding, and companionship. He didn't ask her to reveal everything at once. He didn't push or prod. He simply offered his presence, and in that, she found a kind of safety she had never experienced before. One afternoon, as they walked along a path lined with wildflowers, she found herself opening up again. "I've spent so many years trying to please others," she said, her voice soft, almost lost among the rustling leaves. "I've made choices based on what I thought people wanted, instead of what I truly felt. And for a long time I thought that was all I was capable of, living for others, not for myself." She paused, looking down at her hands, which she nervously twisted together. "But being with you, it's different. I feel like I can be myself, without pretending, without hiding." He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's because you can," he said simply. "You've always been capable of being true to yourself. You just needed someone to remind you that it's okay. Life can be hard, and people can be harsh, but that doesn't change who you are at your core. Your heart, your courage, your honesty, that's what matters." His words weren't grand or dramatic. They were steady, honest, and full of warmth. She felt a shiver of emotion run through her, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet happiness. She realized that in sharing her past and her fears, she wasn't just being vulnerable. She was learning to trust herself and the people who truly cared. For years, she had built walls around her heart, convinced that no one could understand or accept her fully. But here was someone who didn't just accept her. He valued her honesty, her courage, and the very essence of who she was. That realization brought a sense of peace she hadn't known she could feel. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, she noticed a change in herself. She was more confident, more willing to express her thoughts and feelings. She laughed more freely, smiled more often, and even started to notice the small joys in life that she had long ignored. The simple act of being honest, of sharing her truth without fear of judgment, had sparked a transformation. She felt lighter, freer, as if a burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying had finally been lifted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, they found themselves sitting by the edge of a quiet pond. The water was still, reflecting the colors of the sky like a perfect mirror. She skipped a small stone across the surface, watching the ripples expand outward. He watched her quietly, his gaze calm and steady, as if waiting for her to speak. "I've been thinking a lot about my life," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. About the choices I've made, the people I've been with, and the ways I've tried to protect myself. And I realized something important. I don't want to live in fear anymore. I don't want to hide or pretend. I want to be honest with myself and with others. And I want to live for me, not for anyone else. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's a brave decision, he said. It's not always easy to face ourselves and take responsibility for our lives, but once you do, you open the door to something real, something that lasts longer than fear or regret. It's the start of a life lived with intention, with courage, and with heart. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of gratitude and relief. For so long she had felt lost, weighed down by shame and fear. But now, with his words and presence, she began to see herself differently. She wasn't defined by her past. She was defined by her ability to grow, to learn, and to embrace life fully. And for the first time, she felt a sense of hope that was quiet, steady, and enduring. Over the next few days, their bond deepened in subtle, meaningful ways. They spent time exploring the countryside, tending to small tasks on the land, and simply enjoying each other's company without any pressure or expectation. Each shared laugh, each quiet conversation, and each moment of understanding strengthened the connection between them. She realized that love, or at least something very close to it, wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to see someone fully, flaws and all. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of a large oak tree, she turned to him and asked, "Have you ever been afraid to be honest with someone? Afraid they wouldn't accept the real you?" He smiled gently, a faraway look in his eyes. "Many times," he admitted. "We all carry fears, regrets, and mistakes. But the truth is, honesty is worth the risk. It's what allows people to connect, to trust, and to grow together. Without it, we live half lives, never fully known or understood." She listened carefully, feeling the weight of his words. It was strange how someone she had just met could make such a profound impact on her understanding of life and herself. She realized that this cowboy, with his calm presence and honest heart, had shown her a path she hadn't dared to imagine before, a path toward self-acceptance, trust, and real connection. As the sun set and the sky turned to twilight, she felt a quiet sense of transformation within herself. She had spent years hiding, running, and protecting herself from the judgments of others. But now, with someone who saw her truly and accepted her fully, she felt ready to embrace life in a new way. She was learning that courage wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about facing that fear with honesty and grace. That evening, as they walked back toward the small house, she noticed how different everything felt. The air seemed fresher, the colors brighter, and even the quiet sounds of the night carried a sense of possibility. She realized that this journey she was on wasn't just about finding someone who understood her. It was about finding herself, her strength, and her capacity to live fully and honestly. When they reached the porch, he paused and looked at her, his gaze steady and kind. "You're stronger than you realize," he said, "and every step you take toward honesty and self-acceptance only makes you stronger. Keep going. Don't be afraid to trust yourself, and don't be afraid to let others see the real you." She smiled, feeling a mixture of gratitude and hope. For the first time, she truly believed that she could face the future without fear. She could be herself, fully and openly, and she could allow someone else to see her for who she truly was. And in that belief, she found a quiet but powerful sense of freedom, a freedom that had been missing from her life for far too long. That night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on the past few weeks. She had learned so much about herself, about honesty, and about the value of being seen and understood. She realized that the cowboy had shown her something invaluable, not just love or companionship, but the possibility of living fully and authentically. And as sleep slowly overtook her, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she was on the path to a life lived with courage, honesty, and heart. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She had spent so long carrying the weight of her past, mistakes, regrets, and the fear of being judged, that it had shaped the way she saw herself. But now, something had shifted. The honesty she had found with the cowboy, the patience and understanding he had shown, had opened a door she hadn't dared to imagine. She was beginning to see herself as someone capable of love, trust, and true connection. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of pink, gold, and purple, they walked together along the familiar path through the fields. The air was warm, carrying the scent of wild flowers and freshly turned earth. It was quiet, except for the soft crunch of their footsteps on the dirt and the occasional chirp of a bird settling in for the night. She felt a sense of calm she had never experienced before, as if the world had slowed down just for them, allowing her to fully appreciate this moment of peace and clarity. They stopped by the edge of the hill that overlooked the town, the view stretching out beneath them like a painted canvas. She took a deep breath, feeling the wind brush against her face, and let her eyes wander across the landscape. "I never thought I'd feel like this," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I never thought I could let go of so much fear, of so much doubt, and just be." He turned to her, his gaze steady, calm, and full of warmth. "You've done the work," he said quietly. "You've faced your fears, been honest with yourself, and opened your heart. That's not easy. It takes courage more than most people realize, and now you're ready to live fully, with no shame, no regrets, just honesty and love." She felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of emotion she couldn't quite name, gratitude, relief, hope. It all swirled together in her chest. She realized that this journey wasn't just about finding someone who understood her, it was about finding herself, about discovering that she could be seen, loved, and respected for who she truly was. And in that realization, she felt a sense of freedom, a lifting of the weight that had burdened her for years. The cowboy reached out and gently took her hand. His touch was firm, yet tender, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that she had someone walking beside her on this path. "Your past doesn't define you," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "It's part of your story, yes, but it's not the whole story. Your heart, your courage, your honesty, those are the parts that truly matter, and you've shown them not just to me, but to yourself." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see judgment, pity, or disappointment. She saw understanding, acceptance, and a deep sense of respect. It was as if he could see the real her, the parts she had tried to hide, the mistakes she had feared would define her. And he still valued her, still believed in her. And in that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. For years, she had lived cautiously, protecting herself from the possibility of being hurt or rejected. She had built walls around her heart, convinced that no one could truly understand or accept her. But now, she realized that those walls weren't necessary. She could allow herself to be seen, fully and honestly, and she could trust that she was worthy of love and care. The realization was both exhilarating and humbling, a quiet awakening to the possibility of a life lived with courage and authenticity. They sat together on a large rock overlooking the town, the cool breeze brushing against their faces. The sky had turned deep blue, dotted with stars that twinkled like tiny jewels. She felt a sense of connection to the world, to the night, and to the cowboy beside her. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was about presence, understanding, and the quiet power of being truly seen. "I've spent so long hiding," she admitted softly, her fingers intertwined with his. "Hiding from myself, from others, from the life I wanted. I was afraid of being judged, of being rejected. But now, I feel like I can finally step into the life I've been too afraid to live." He smiled, a small, reassuring curve of his lips. "That's because you've found your courage," he said. "Not the kind of courage that shouts or demands attention, but the quiet kind that faces truth, accepts mistakes, and keeps moving forward. That courage is what will guide you through life, and it's what will allow you to find joy, love, and fulfillment." She took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the heavy weight of guilt pressing down on her chest. She didn't feel the sting of shame or the fear of rejection. She felt light, free, and ready. Ready to embrace herself fully, ready to live authentically, and ready to allow someone else to see her without fear. The cowboy squeezed her hand gently, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "You've come a long way," he said softly, "and I hope you see it too. You're stronger, braver, and more capable than you realize. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, make you forget that." She smiled, a true, open smile that reached her eyes. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and hope. For so long she had believed that she was unworthy, broken, or too flawed to be loved. But now, sitting here with someone who saw her fully and accepted her without judgment, she realized that she had been wrong. She was worthy, she was enough, and she had the power to live the life she wanted with honesty, courage, and heart. As the night deepened, they stayed there in silence, simply holding hands and watching the stars. There was no need for words. The quiet connection between them said everything. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had faced her fears, embraced her truth, and found someone who valued her for who she truly was. And in that peace, she felt hope, a hope that life could be beautiful, even after mistakes, regrets, and heartache. Finally, the cowboy spoke again, his voice gentle and steady. "Remember this moment," he said. "Not because it's perfect, not because life will always be easy, but because it's real. It's the moment you realized your worth, your strength, and your courage. And it's the moment you chose to step forward, not backward, into the life you deserve." She nodded, feeling tears well up in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of release and gratitude. She had been carrying so much for so long, and now she felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in years. She realized that love, trust, and connection weren't about perfection. They were about honesty, courage, and the willingness to be seen fully. And in that realization, she felt a deep sense of joy and possibility. The night air was cool and gentle, and she took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs and calm her mind. She felt grounded, centered, and ready for whatever came next. The past was behind her, but it no longer held power over her. She had faced it, accepted it, and learned from it. And now she could move forward, fully and fearlessly, with a heart open to life and all its possibilities. He squeezed her hand once more, a silent promise of understanding and companionship. "You're ready," he said softly. "Ready to live, ready to love, ready to embrace the life that's waiting for you. Don't be afraid to step into it." She smiled, feeling a mixture of gratitude, relief, and excitement. She realized that she had been given a gift, the gift of seeing herself clearly, of being seen and accepted by someone who truly cared, and of finding the courage to embrace life fully. And in that moment, she knew that the journey ahead, no matter what challenges it held, would be one she faced with honesty, courage, and heart. As the stars sparkled above them and the moon cast its gentle glow across the fields, she felt a sense of completion, not in an ending, but in a beginning. The beginning of a life lived with awareness, with trust, and with love, for herself and for the possibilities that lay ahead. And in that quiet, profound moment, she allowed herself to hope fully, to dream without fear, and to embrace the life she had always longed for.